There is something deeply honest about speaking to you before life has even placed you in front of me, before I know the sound of your laughter, before I have seen the look in your eyes when you are tired, quiet, or trying to be strong. And maybe that is because some truths do not need timing to become real. They only need courage. So here is mine. I have carried the feeling of you in places where nothing else seemed to last. In long seasons of silence, in moments when life felt full on the outside but strangely unfinished within me. Not because I was waiting for someone to complete me, but because some part of my heart always believed there was a woman I would one day meet with honesty, gentleness, and reverence. A woman whose presence would not feel like noise, but like peace. And before anything else, before love becomes a promise, before marriage becomes a bond, before we learn each other in all the small and sacred ways that matter, I need you to know this one quiet truth. I was never searching for perfection. I was always hoping for something real. I have spent a long time learning that vulnerability is not the same as weakness, even though for years I treated it like something dangerous. Something that had to be hidden before it could be used against me. I thought strength meant being composed all the time, being the one who could carry pain quietly, smile when necessary, and never let the deeper parts of my heart rise fully to the surface. I believed that if I became careful enough with my feelings, then I could protect myself from disappointment. But the truth is, protecting myself that way did not bring me peace. It only taught me how to survive without ever truly feeling known. And I do not want to love you from that guarded place. I do not want to meet you through walls that life convinced me were wisdom. I want to meet you as I am, with honesty in my voice and openness in my heart, because anything sacred deserves truth from the beginning. There were moments in my life when I looked calm on the outside and felt completely unsettled within. I carried myself like a man who had everything under control, but inside, I was still trying to understand how to hold all the things I never said. The disappointments, the quiet griefs, the hopes I buried, because I was tired of watching them go unanswered. I learned how to keep moving. I learned how to stay useful. I learned how to keep my world in order, even when something inside me felt distant from itself. And maybe that is one of the loneliest things a person can experience, not being abandoned by the world, but becoming unseen inside your own silence. That kind of loneliness does not always announce itself. Sometimes it looks like maturity. Sometimes it sounds like patience. Sometimes it sounds like patience. Sometimes it hides inside the words, "I'm fine." But deep down, it is just the ache of a heart that wants to be met honestly and has not yet found where to rest. So if one day I stand in front of you with tenderness in my eyes, I need you to understand that tenderness did not come from ease. It came from surviving things that could have made me colder and choosing not to let them. It came from realizing that pain can either make a person more guarded or more gentle, and I had to decide which kind of man I wanted to become. I did not want to become hard. I did not want to become the kind of man who mistakes distance for dignity or emotional control for peace. I wanted to become someone whose heart remained open without becoming careless, someone who could love deeply without losing himself, someone who understood that emotional safety is one of the purest gifts one human being can offer another. That is the kind of love I want to bring to you. Not love that overwhelms, not love that performs, love that protects what is soft without making it feel small. I think that is why I believe so deeply in quiet love, the kind that does not need to prove itself every moment because it is already rooted in sincerity, the kind that is not built on intensity alone, but on steadiness, respect, and presence. I do not dream of a love that is only beautiful when life is easy. I dream of a love that stays gentle when life becomes heavy. I dream of a marriage where honesty is not dragged out through fear, but offered freely because both hearts know they are safe. I dream of the kind of connection where silence is not punishment, but peace, where one glance can say, "I am here," where one touch can say, "You do not have to carry this alone." To me, That kind of love is not small. It is the deepest kind. Because what is devotion if it disappears the moment life becomes inconvenient? What is commitment if it only survives in comfort? What is marriage if it is not a place where two souls can rest in truth? But here is something I have come to understand slowly. A person cannot offer emotional safety to someone else until they have faced the places inside themselves that are still ruled by fear. I had to learn that. I had to sit with my own habits of withdrawal, my own instinct to retreat when something mattered too much, my own temptation to act unbothered when I was actually feeling deeply. I had to ask myself difficult questions. Why did I sometimes make silence my shelter? Why did I confuse being needed with being loved? Why did I believe that being strong meant asking for less than I truly needed? These were not easy things to face. But I faced them because I do not want to build a future with you on top of unhealed patterns. I do not want to hand you the responsibility of rescuing me from wounds I refuse to acknowledge. I want to come to you already committed to truth, already willing to grow, already aware that love becomes stronger when both people are humble enough to keep becoming better for it. That matters because I know you will have your own story too. Your own carefulness. Your own invisible bruises, your own moments of wanting closeness and fearing it at the same time. And I do not expect you to arrive untouched by life. In some quiet way, I think the people who know how to love most sincerely are often the ones who have had to rebuild themselves more than once. They know the value of gentleness because they understand what it means to be handled carelessly. They know the importance of consistency because they have lived through confusion. They know why respect matters because they have felt the emptiness of being misunderstood. So if your heart is cautious when we meet, I will not take that personally. I will not rush you past your healing just to satisfy my desire to feel close. I will not demand trust from you like it is owed. I will earn it in the only way that matters, through patience, through honesty, through the repeated proof that my presence is safe for your soul. Maybe that is what love is supposed to feel like at its most real. Not pressure, not performance, not the exhausting need to keep proving your worth every day to avoid being left behind. Maybe love is simply the slow and sacred discovery that you can be fully human with someone and still be cherished there. You can have fears and still be loved. You can have flaws and still be respected. You can have difficult days and still be held with tenderness. I want that for us. Not a love built on ideal versions of ourselves, but one built on the courage to be real. One built on the quiet promise that we will meet each other with sincerity, even when life is tiring, even when communication takes effort, even when growth asks us to let go of old ways of protecting ourselves. Because I do not think the strongest relationships are the ones without struggle. I think they are the ones where both people remain kind while learning how to move through struggle together. This is where something inside me changed. I stopped longing for a love that would impress the world, and I started longing for one that would bring peace to the heart. I stopped wanting something dramatic enough to be admired and started wanting something honest enough to last. I began to see that the truest form of devotion is often quiet. It is remembering. It is noticing. It is staying. It is choosing respect in moments when frustration could easily become cruelty. It is speaking carefully when the other person is already hurting. It is keeping your word in ordinary moments, not only extraordinary ones. That is the kind of man I want to be for you. A man whose love is not loud because it is uncertain, but steady because it is real. A man who does not make you question whether you matter. A man who understands that being loved should feel like being safe enough to breathe. So this is the truth at the center of my heart as I begin this chapter of speaking to you. I am no longer afraid of being seen the way I once was. Life taught me that there is no honor in being emotionally unreachable. There is no peace in pretending not to need connection. There is no strength in withholding tenderness from the very thing your soul has always longed for. I want to love you with openness, not because I am naive about pain, but because I have learned that pain is not a reason to close forever. It is a reason to become wiser in where and how you open. And when I think of you, I do not think of a place to hide from life. I think of a place to share it honestly. A place where trust can grow slowly, where loyalty can deepen naturally, where two people can choose each other with reverence instead of fear. That is how I want to begin with you, not with perfection, not with performance, but with the quiet courage of a heart that is finally ready to be true. Trust is a quiet thing, and I think that is why so many people misunderstand it. They look for it in big promises, in perfect words, in moments that sound beautiful when spoken aloud, but I have come to believe that trust is born somewhere much smaller and much deeper than that. It begins in the subtle ways a person handles your heart when there is nothing to gain from being gentle. It grows in the moments when someone could dismiss your feelings and chooses instead to make room for them. It lives in consistency, in emotional honesty, in the quiet relief of realizing that what someone says and what someone does no longer feel like two separate things. That is the kind of trust I want to build with you. Not something rushed, not something assumed. Something earned with care, protected with sincerity, and strengthened over time until it becomes the ground beneath everything else we are. I know trust does not always come easily, especially when life has already taught us how fragile it can be. Sometimes people break it loudly, and sometimes they break it in ways so subtle that it takes time to even name the wound. Sometimes it is broken through betrayal, and sometimes through neglect, through inconsistency, through the slow ache of being told you matter while being made to feel otherwise. Those kinds of experiences change a person. They make the heart more alert. They teach it to hesitate before relaxing, to study the tone in a voice, to search for what might shift without warning. I understand that. And if you carry any of that when we find each other, I will not meet your caution with frustration. I will meet it with patience. I will understand that trust is not rebuilt through pressure. It is rebuilt through safety, through steadiness, through the repeated experience of being treated with care until fear begins to loosen its grip. I think one of the purest forms of love is making another person feel emotionally safe enough to be honest, safe enough to speak without rehearsing every sentence first, safe enough to admit when they are hurt, confused, tired, or afraid, without worrying that their vulnerability will be used against them later. That kind of safety does not happen by accident. It is created intentionally. It is protected in the way we listen, in the way we respond, in the way we hold each other's truth with respect, even when it is difficult to hear. If I become your husband one day, I want you to know that your honesty will never be a burden to me. Your feelings will never be something I tolerate only when they are convenient. I want to be the kind of man whose presence lowers your defenses, not because I demand your trust, but because over time I have given your heart enough peace to rest. There is something sacred about being trusted by the person you love. It is not a casual thing. It is not something to hold carelessly. To be trusted means someone has handed you access to the parts of them that do not come out in ordinary company, the fears they try to hide, the memories that still ache, the insecurities they laugh off in public but feel deeply in private, the hopes they barely say out loud because they are afraid of seeing them disappointed again. To be trusted with those things is not a right. It is a responsibility, and I would never want to forget that. I would never want to grow so comfortable in our bond that I stop treating your inner world like something holy. Love to me is not just about being chosen. It is about being careful with what your partner places in your hands. But here's the truth I have learned the hard way. Trust cannot survive where ego is stronger than humility. The moment a person becomes more committed to being right than being honest, something tender begins to erode. The moment pride matters more than repair, distance quietly enters the room. I do not want that for us. I do not want a relationship where misunderstandings become competitions, where pain becomes a debate, where one person's vulnerability is answered with defensiveness instead of care. I want us to be able to pause when emotions are high and remember that we belong to each other more than we belong to our pride. I want us to know how to return to each other after difficult moments with softness still intact. Not because we will never hurt each other, but because when hurt happens, we will value healing more than winning. This is where trust becomes more than comfort. It becomes devotion in practice. It becomes the daily decision to be truthful even when truth is uncomfortable. It becomes the discipline of staying reliable in a world that often celebrates detachment. It becomes the quiet courage of saying, I will not disappear when closeness begins to ask more of me. I will not punish your honesty with distance. I will not make you regret opening your heart. I think that is part of what makes marriage so meaningful when it is real. It is not just two people sharing love when life is kind. It is two people creating a bond strong enough to remain tender even when life tests the edges of that tenderness. It is choosing each other in ways that the world may never notice, but that the soul feels deeply every day. And I do not mean choosing each other in some dramatic, exhausting way that leaves no room for being human. I mean choosing each other in ordinary faithfulness. In the way we speak after long days, in the way we apologize when we are wrong, in the way we protect each other's dignity even in moments of frustration, in the way we refuse to let temporary emotions make permanent damage. Those things may seem small from the outside, but I think they are where trust either deepens or quietly begins to fracture. A relationship is not only shaped by the big moments that define it, it is shaped by the small ones that repeat. So I want our love to be built through good repetitions, through kindness repeated, through honesty repeated, through respect repeated, through the simple, beautiful rhythm of two people proving to each other again and again that this bond is a safe place to stay. Maybe this is what real intimacy begins with, not chemistry alone, not attraction alone, not even affection alone, but the growing certainty that neither of us has to hide in order to be loved. What a rare thing that is. To be known without being reduced to your flaws, to be understood without having to explain your pain perfectly, to be trusted and to trust in return slowly, naturally, without force. I want that kind of closeness with you. I want the kind of bond where silence does not automatically mean distance, because trust has already taught us how to remain connected even in quiet moments. I want the kind of closeness where we can be fully ourselves and still feel chosen there. Not chosen for what we perform. Chosen for what is real. Before you go any further, hear this. I do not expect trust to appear all at once just because love is sincere. I know it takes time. I know it asks for proof. I know that even two good hearts can still need patience as they learn how to rest beside one another. So I am willing to move with that patience. I am willing to let trust unfold the way roots unfold beneath the earth, quietly, slowly, almost invisibly at first, until one day what we have built can hold the weight of every season. That is what I want with you. Not something fragile and fast, but something lasting and deeply rooted. Something that can survive misunderstandings, sorrow, change, and time. Because it was never built on excitement alone. It was built on truth. And maybe that is why I feel so deeply that trust is one of the purest expressions of love. Because when I trust you, I am not just saying I believe in your words. I am saying I feel safe enough to place my heart near yours without fear of being handled carelessly. And when you trust me, I will never treat that as something ordinary. I will treat it as one of the greatest honors of my life. I will guard it. I will nurture it. I will remember that love becomes meaningful not only when it is felt, but when it becomes dependable. So if chapter 1 was the quiet opening of my heart, then this is the promise growing inside it now. I do not want to simply love you. I want to become a place where your soul can finally exhale, knowing that what we build between us will be honest enough to trust and steady enough to keep. There is a kind of intimacy that has nothing to do with appearances and everything to do with emotional truth. It is not built in the moments when two people are simply close in body, but in the moments when they are unafraid to be close in spirit. That is the kind of intimacy I long for with you. Not something shallow, not something rushed, not something that glitters on the surface and disappears the moment life becomes difficult. I want the kind of closeness that feels like coming home after carrying too much for too long. The kind where I can look at you and feel no need to hide what is human in me. The kind where your presence does not ask me to be impressive, only honest. Because I think that is what the heart is truly searching for beneath all its fears and longings. Not just admiration, not just desire, but the quiet miracle of being fully known and still deeply welcomed. I imagine intimacy with you as something gentle and sacred, something that grows through trust and is protected by tenderness. I think it begins in the smallest things, in the comfort of shared silence that does not need to be filled, in the way two people slowly learn each other's rhythms, each other's sensitivities, each other's unspoken languages. It lives in the little pauses, in the glances that carry meaning, in the soft awareness that the person beside you is not just listening to your words, but paying attention to your heart. I want that kind of closeness with you. I want to know when your smile is real and when it is covering something heavier. I want to know what quiet means for you, whether it is peace or pain, rest or retreat. I want to understand the parts of you that only appear when the world finally grows still enough for truth to come forward. I think one of the most beautiful things love can offer is the freedom to take off every emotional mask you learn to wear just to survive. So much of life teaches us to perform, to stay composed, to present only the polished pieces, to hide our need, our fear, our uncertainty, because somewhere along the way we were made to feel that being deeply human was too much for other people to hold. But real intimacy asks for the opposite. It asks us to come closer without armor. It asks us to speak in our natural voice. It asks us to trust that being real will not make us less lovable in the eyes of the right person. With you, I want to live inside that truth. I do not want us to spend our marriage pretending to be invulnerable. I want us to become the one place in each other's lives where pretense can finally rest. But here is the truth I have never said out loud. I do not just want to be loved by you. I want to be understood by you in the quiet ways that language alone cannot reach. I want you to sense when something is weighing on me, even when I struggle to name it. I want to learn how to do the same for you. I want us to become so familiar with each other's inner worlds that care becomes instinctive, not forced, not mechanical, not something we do to maintain appearances, something natural, because love has made us attentive. I think there is a tenderness in that kind of knowing that goes beyond romance. It becomes a form of protection, a form of devotion, a way of saying without words, I have learned your heart carefully, and I will not handle it roughly. This is where something inside me changed. I stopped thinking of intimacy as something proven by closeness alone, and I began seeing it as something built through emotional safety, honesty, and time. I began to understand that the deepest connection between two people is not found in how intensely they feel for one another in a single moment, but in how gently they continue to make room for each other over many moments. Intimacy is the courage to stay open. It is the willingness to keep telling the truth kindly. It is the discipline of not withdrawing love just because life has become inconvenient or emotions have become complex. It is learning how to remain reachable, even when you are tired, even when you are frustrated, even when old fears tempt you to shut down. That is the kind of closeness I want to practice with you, the kind that becomes stronger, not because it avoids difficulty, but because it keeps choosing sincerity through it. I want our love to feel lived in, not performed. I want it to feel like a place where we can bring our whole selves without fear of being too much. I want to know your laughter, yes, but I also want to know your silence. I want to know what brings you peace, what drains you, what memories still live quietly behind your eyes, what dreams you barely say aloud because you are afraid they might sound too fragile in open air. And I want you to know those things about me too. I want you to know what kind of days make me retreat inward, what kind of words help me return to myself, what kind of reassurance reaches me most deeply when I'm carrying too much. Because intimacy is not just being near, it is learning how to care for what is hidden. There is something deeply moving about the thought of building that kind of marriage with you. A marriage where we do not just share a home, but create one inside each other. A place where our hearts can rest without suspicion. A place where the truth does not have to knock twice before it is let in. A place where our love is not measured by appearances, but by the depth of peace it creates between us. I think that is why the image of home means so much to me when I think of you. Not a home made only of walls and routine, but a home made of trust, softness, and steady presence. A home where we can return after difficult days and remember who we are beneath the noise of the world. A home where your spirit is safe with mine and mine is safe with yours. Maybe this is what real closeness was always meant to feel like. Not possession. Not pressure, not the fear of losing each other every time life becomes heavy, but a gentle nearness that keeps deepening because both people keep choosing honesty over image, tenderness over pride, and presence over distance. I want our intimacy to be like that, quiet but unmistakable, soft but strong, the kind that does not need constant proof because it is already living in the way we treat each other when no one else is watching. The way we speak at the end of a hard day, the way we reach for each other without hesitation, the way we notice the slightest sadness and respond with care instead of impatience. Those things may seem small, but I think they are where the soul feels most loved. Before you go any further, hear this. I will never want a version of closeness that asks you to disappear inside the relationship just to keep it peaceful. I do not want your silence if that silence is built on suppression. I do not want your agreement if it costs you your truth. I want intimacy that allows both of us to remain fully ourselves while growing closer, not farther, through that honesty. I want a bond where your voice feels welcome, where your emotions do not threaten our connection, where even difficult conversations can become another way of knowing each other more deeply instead of another reason to retreat. To me, love is only sacred when it makes room for the full humanity of the person beside you. So when I think of chapter 3 of this message to you, this is what lives at its center. I do not just want to share a life with you. I want to share an inner world with you. I want the kind of intimacy that allows us to exhale, to soften, to be deeply real without fear. I want us to become each other's quiet refuge, not from life itself, but from the loneliness of going through life unseen. And if love is patient and trust is steady, then intimacy is the moment those truths begin to feel warm and alive between two people. It is the place where devotion becomes personal, where closeness becomes meaningful, and where two hearts slowly realize they no longer have to guard every tender part of themselves to survive. With you, that is the nearness I hope to build. Not fast, not forced, but deep enough to feel like truth, and peaceful enough to feel like home. Growth is a tender thing, even when it arrives through pain. For a long time, I thought growth would feel like certainty, like finally becoming unshakable, like reaching some calm and polished version of myself where old fears could no longer reach me. But that is not how it happened. Growth came to me in quieter ways. It came when life stripped away my illusions and left me alone with the truth of who I was when no one else was looking. It came when I had to sit with my own patterns, my own wounds, my own ways of protecting myself that were no longer protecting me at all. It came when I realized that becoming better is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming more honest, more gentle, more aware of what love actually asks of a soul that wants to last. And if I am ever to love you the way you deserve, then I know I cannot remain the man who only knows how to protect himself. I have to become the man who knows how to grow with another person. In truth, I think one of the deepest responsibilities of love is allowing it to change you without letting it erase you. That balance matters to me. I do not want to come into marriage with you clinging so tightly to old habits that I make growth impossible. And I do not want either of us to lose the essence of who we are just to keep peace on the surface. I want something more beautiful than that. I want us to sharpen each other with kindness. I want us to challenge each other with respect. I want us to become better, not through pressure, but through the quiet influence of being deeply loved by someone who sees our potential and still accepts our present self. Because I think that is one of the miracles of real connection. It does not shame you into growth, it invites you into it. It makes you want to become more truthful, more patient, more emotionally mature, because you begin to understand that love is not only something you feel, it is also something you become worthy of carrying well. There are parts of me that were shaped by hardship, and I do not say that to sound strong. I say it because hardship has a way of leaving fingerprints on the heart. It teaches you what to fear, what to expect, what to hide, what to doubt. Sometimes it makes you believe that surviving is enough. But surviving is not the same as living, and it is not the same as loving. Loving asks for a different kind of courage. It asks you to stay open where life once taught you to close. It asks you to remain present where pain once taught you to disappear into yourself. It asks you to believe that not every ending is inevitable, not every closeness is temporary, not every promise is empty. That kind of faith does not come easily. It has to be chosen. It has to be practiced. And I want you to know that I am willing to practice it. I am willing to keep growing beyond my fears so that the love I give you is not limited by the wounds I once carried alone. But here is the truth I have never said out loud. Some of the most important growth in my life happened in silence, where no one could see it and no one would have praised it. It happened in the private moments when I chose not to become bitter after being disappointed. It happened when I resisted the urge to turn numb just because feeling deeply had hurt before. It happened when I began to understand that healing is not always dramatic. Sometimes healing is simply noticing that you no longer react from the same wound. Sometimes it is pausing before speaking and choosing tenderness instead of defense. Sometimes it is recognizing an old fear rising in you and deciding not to let it control the way you love. Those moments are small from the outside, but they change the whole direction of a life, and I think that is how growth often works. Quietly, patiently, almost invisibly, until one day you realize you are no longer living from the same pain you once thought would define you forever. This is where something inside me changed. I stopped seeing growth as a lonely task and started seeing it as something that could become sacred inside a relationship. I began to understand that the right kind of love does not only comfort you, it also calls you higher, not through criticism, not through control, but through the steady invitation to live more truthfully. I want us to have that kind of marriage. A marriage where we are both safe enough to be soft and honest enough to keep growing. A marriage where we can say to each other, "This hurt me. This matters to me. This is where I still need healing." And know that those confessions are not threats to our bond, but threads that deepen it. I want us to grow not by pretending we have no flaws, but by being humble enough to face them together with grace. I think patience becomes especially important here, because growth is rarely quick and almost never neat. People carry histories into love. They carry insecurities, habits, survivor responses, old griefs that still echo at unexpected times. I know I will carry some of that. I know you will too. And I do not want either of us to be loved only for the parts that are already easy. I want us to be loved with the understanding that becoming takes time. That some fears need gentleness before they can loosen, that some patterns need awareness before they can change. That sometimes the most loving thing we can say to each other is not hurry up and heal, but I see you trying and I am still here. There is something so holy to me about that kind of patience. It is not passive, it is devoted. It is the decision to keep watering something while it is still growing roots. Maybe this is what mature love really is. Not the fantasy of two finished people meeting at the perfect moment, but the reality of two sincere people choosing to grow with care. choosing to learn, choosing to apologize, choosing to listen better next time, choosing to break cycles instead of repeating them. That is the kind of future I want with you. I do not want a love that stays the same out of fear. I want a love that deepens because we are brave enough to evolve within it. I want to be able to look back after years together and see not only that we remained loyal, but that we helped each other become more peaceful, more grounded, more whole. To me, that is one of the most beautiful meanings of marriage. Not just companionship, but transformation held with reverence. Before you go any further, hear this. I do not believe growth should ever come at the cost of kindness. I do not want us to use truth as a weapon or self-improvement as a reason to judge one another harshly. I want our growth to feel human. Honest, yes, but also merciful. Clear, but never cruel. I want to be the kind of man who can look at your imperfections and still speak to you with honor. Because I know how much courage it takes for any person to keep growing in a world that often shames people for not being healed fast enough. And I want to receive that same grace from you, not so we stay stagnant, but so we can keep becoming without fear. Because I think people grow best where they are deeply respected. When I imagine us years into our life together, I do not imagine a perfect story untouched by difficulty. I imagine something more meaningful than that. I imagine two people who have learned how to meet difficulty without turning away from each other. I imagine a bond that has been refined by time, softened by forgiveness, strengthened by honesty. I imagine the quiet beauty of knowing that we did not just stay together because it was comfortable, but because we kept choosing what was true, what was kind, and what was worth protecting. That kind of growth would mean everything to me. Not growth for appearance. Not growth to impress anyone, growth that makes our home gentler, growth that makes our love steadier, growth that helps us become the kind of partners whose presence brings peace instead of confusion. So this chapter of my heart is about becoming. Becoming more open, becoming more patient, becoming more worthy of the trust I hope to receive from you. I do not want to love you only with the parts of me that are already healed. I want to love you with the full sincerity of a man who is still growing and is no longer ashamed to admit it. Because I think one of the most beautiful things I could ever say to you is this. I will not stop becoming better just because I have been loved. I will become better because I have been loved well. And if we are careful with each other, if we remain humble, if we keep choosing honesty over pride and patience over pressure, then our love will not only survive the years, it will deepen inside them, like a strong foundation hidden beneath a peaceful home, holding more than anyone sees and making everything above it possible. By the time love becomes real, it is no longer only about feeling. It becomes about meaning. It becomes about what two people are truly building together, beneath the surface of daily life, beneath the routines, beneath the responsibilities, beneath all the ordinary moments that slowly reveal whether a bond is merely pleasant or deeply sacred. And when I think of you, when I think of the life I hope we create, I do not only imagine affection, I imagine purpose. I imagine a marriage that does not drift aimlessly from one season to the next, but one that is quietly rooted in shared values, shared sincerity, and the steady understanding that what we are protecting together is bigger than either one of us alone. To me, that is part of what makes love so meaningful. It is not just that two hearts find comfort in each other. It is that they begin to shape a life that reflects something honest, peaceful, and enduring. I think there is a difference between simply being together and truly belonging to a shared purpose. Being together can happen through convenience, attraction, timing, or familiarity. But shared purpose asks for something deeper. It asks two people to look in the same direction without losing sight of each other. It asks them to build not only for the present moment, but for the kind of future that will still feel worthy when emotions are tired and life becomes demanding. I want that with you. I want a love that is not only tender, but grounded. A marriage that is not only warm, but wise. A bond that understands that feelings are precious, but they are not enough on their own. They need direction. They They need principles. They need the quiet discipline of two people choosing again and again to protect what matters more than their passing moods. That is the kind of devotion I want to live with you. For me, one of the deepest meanings of marriage is that it turns love into a place of responsibility without taking away its tenderness. It says what we have is precious enough to be guarded, nurtured, and honored through time. It says this is not casual, not disposable, not something we keep only while it is effortless. It becomes a promise with roots. A promise that asks us to remain sincere when life stretches us, to remain respectful when emotions are strained, to remain faithful not only in presence but in spirit. I do not take that lightly. I do not think of marriage as a beautiful symbol alone. I think of it as a sacred stewardship, a daily invitation to care for something living between us, something that can either deepen through humility and honesty or slowly weaken through neglect. And because I believe it is sacred, I want to enter it with reverence, not carelessness. But here is the truth I have never said out loud. I do not want to build a future with you that looks full on the outside while feeling emotionally empty within. I do not want us to become two people who share a roof but stop sharing our inner world. I do not want us to become efficient partners and lonely souls. I want more than that. I want us to stay awake to each other. I want us to protect the emotional life of our marriage as carefully as we protect its practical life. I want us to remember that what keeps a bond alive is not only duty, but presence. Not only commitment, but attentiveness. Not only vows spoken once, but love practiced quietly in the texture of real days. Because what use is a shared future if we stop truly meeting each other inside it? This is where something inside me changed. I began to understand that a meaningful connection is not built only on how much two people love each other, but on how deeply they honor what their love is meant to serve: peace, safety, truth, growth, loyalty, a home that feels gentle to return to, a life where both hearts can remain soft without becoming unstable. A future that does not depend on intensity to feel alive because it has learned the deeper beauty of steadiness. That realization changed the way I think about devotion. Devotion is not merely staying. Devotion is the willingness to keep pouring sincerity into what you have chosen, even when no one is watching, even when life becomes repetitive, even when the world offers 1,000 distractions that make shallow things seem easier to maintain than sacred ones. I want to live that kind of devotion with you. I imagine our future sometimes in very quiet ways, not through dramatic scenes or perfect moments, but through the atmosphere of it. I imagine a home where peace is not rare, a home where truth can be spoken gently, a home where both of us know that respect is not conditional. I imagine the kind of life where we can sit together after a long day and feel that even in silence, something good and faithful is holding us. I imagine laughter that has depth because it has survived sorrow. I imagine tenderness that has weight because it has remained through difficulty. I imagine a partnership where our love does not compete with the world's noise, but quietly outlasts it. That vision means something to me because it is simple, and simple things are often the most sacred when they are real. I think meaning also comes from what love calls out of us in the long run. Does it make us more truthful, more patient, more grounded, more able to give and receive care without fear, more willing to protect peace instead of feeding unnecessary conflict? These are the questions that matter to me. Because a meaningful bond should not only make life feel sweeter in certain moments, it should make life feel more honest as a whole. It should help both people become more aligned with what matters most. I want our marriage to do that. I want it to make us better stewards of our own hearts and kinder guardians of each other's. I want it to become a place where love is not constantly being tested for its existence, because its presence is already clear in the way we live, the way we speak, the way we repair, and the way we remain. Maybe this is what real partnership was always meant to be. Not merely sharing time, but sharing intention. Not merely staying close, but building carefully. Not merely saying we are committed, but creating a life that reflects that commitment in its smallest habits and deepest choices. I want us to know why we are together beyond the fact that we feel deeply. I want us to be able to say that we chose this bond because it makes room for what is most human and most holy in us. Because it protects gentleness. Because it honors truth. Because it gives loyalty somewhere worthy to live. Because it turns love from a private emotion into a shared offering, something that blesses the life around it simply by being sincere. Before you go any further, hear this. I do not expect meaning to arrive fully formed the moment two people promise themselves to one another. I think meaning is built over time, the same way trust is built, the same way intimacy is built, the same way a strong foundation is built. Through repetition, through care, through small, faithful acts that seem ordinary until one day you realize they have created something powerful enough to carry both joy and sorrow without collapsing. That is the future I want with you. Not a fragile happiness that depends on ideal conditions, but a deep and peaceful bond that keeps revealing its worth as the years unfold. A connection that feels more sacred the longer it is lived, not less. And when I say I want to build something meaningful with you, I do not mean I want a life free of pain. I mean I want a life where pain does not make us forget who we are to each other. I want a marriage where hardship becomes another reason to hold each other more carefully, not more carelessly. I want us to remember, especially in difficult seasons, that love is not measured by how untouched it remains, but by how truthfully it continues to show up. Meaning is found there too, in the tested places, in the ordinary endurance of two people who keep choosing reverence over resentment, softness over distance, and loyalty over escape. I believe that kind of love leaves a mark on the soul. The good mark. A healing mark. The kind that changes the way a person understands home. So chapter 5 of my heart is this quiet offering. I do not just want a love story with you. I want a life that means something because we have lived it with care. I want our connection to become a shelter for what is good in us, a steady foundation beneath every dream, every sorrow, every ordinary day that asks us to stay sincere. I want our marriage to be the kind of bond that becomes deeper than romance without ever losing its tenderness, stronger than comfort without ever losing its warmth, holier than appearances because it is built on truth. And if we are blessed enough to find that with each other, then I think we will understand something beautiful at the center of it all. Love was never only meant to make us feel less alone. It was meant to teach us how to build something so honest, so peaceful, and so deeply rooted that both our souls could call it home. What stays with me most when I think about loving you for the rest of my life is not only the beauty of finding you, it is the sacredness of remaining true once I do. Because I have come to understand that the deepest promise in love is not simply that two people choose each other once. It is that they keep choosing each other with sincerity as the years reveal who they really are. And that to me is where love becomes holy. Not in perfect days, not in effortless seasons, not in the version of life that never asks anything difficult of us. It becomes holy in the steady offering of one heart to another, in the repeated decision to protect what is fragile, to honor what is entrusted, and to remain gentle in a world that can make gentleness feel rare. When I imagine you, my future wife, I do not imagine someone I will merely love in passing moments. I imagine someone I will stand beside with reverence. Someone I will keep meeting with honesty, even as time changes us, deepens us, humbles us, and teaches us what devotion truly means. I think that is what I have been moving toward all along, even in the years when I did not fully understand it. Every heartbreak, every silence, every season of growth, every moment I had to choose healing over bitterness. All of it was shaping my heart to recognize something more meaningful than temporary feeling. It was teaching me that love is not meant to be consumed like excitement. It is meant to be lived like truth. And truth, when it is real, has a quiet endurance to it. It does not need constant display. It does not need to beg for attention. It simply remains. It becomes a presence, a foundation, a shelter. I want to be that kind of presence in your life. Not someone who makes beautiful promises and fades when they become difficult to keep, but someone whose love you can lean against without fear. Someone whose commitment does not disappear in hard seasons. Someone whose loyalty feels less like a performance and more like peace. But here is the truth I have never said out loud. When I think of calling you my wife, something in me becomes very still. Not because the thought is small, but because it feels sacred enough to quiet everything unnecessary. There is a difference between wanting companionship and recognizing a covenant. There's a difference between affection and holy responsibility. And marriage, in the deepest sense, feels to me like the place where love stops asking what it can take and starts asking what it can consecrate. What can it protect? What can it nurture? What can it make more peaceful, more honest, more whole? I do not want to enter that bond casually. I want to enter it awake. I want to understand the weight and the beauty of being entrusted with your life in such a personal way. I want to know every day that loving you is not something to handle lightly. It is something to honor. This is where something inside me changed. I stopped seeing forever as a frightening idea and started seeing it as the natural shape of a love that is truly rooted. When love is shallow, forever sounds like pressure. But when love is sincere, forever begins to sound like home. It begins to feel like the most honest answer to a bond that has been built with care. I do not say that because I think the years will always be easy. I say it because I believe that what is built on trust, intimacy, growth, patience, and shared meaning can become strong enough to hold both joy and sorrow without losing its soul. That is what I want with you. A love that does not break the moment life becomes inconvenient. A marriage that does not lose its tenderness when responsibilities grow heavy. A commitment that still feels alive, not because it is constantly dramatic, but because it is deeply, quietly true. I want the later years with you as much as I want the beginning. I want the version of us that has learned each other through time. The version that no longer needs to guess what comfort looks like because we have practiced it for years. I want the ordinary faithfulness of shared mornings, the softness of familiar silence, the unspoken reassurance that comes from knowing we have built something real enough to last. I want the life where love has ripened into wisdom without losing its warmth, where desire has matured into devotion, where admiration has deepened into respect, where the simple act of sitting beside each other at the end of a long day feels like its own kind of blessing. I think there is something deeply beautiful about a love that has lived long enough to become calm without becoming empty, steady without becoming distant, familiar without ever becoming careless. Before you go any further, hear this. I will never want a future with you that is held together only by duty. Duty matters, yes, but I want more than survival. I want aliveness. I want us to keep turning toward each other, keep speaking honestly, keep protecting the softness that first made our love feel sacred. I want to keep learning you, even after years. I want to keep asking what your heart needs. Keep noticing the things that tire you. Keep honoring the ways you change. I do not want to love a frozen version of you. I want to love the woman you keep becoming. And I want that same grace from you too, because I know I will keep becoming as well. I think one of the deepest forms of devotion is allowing love to stay awake, refusing to let it become careless just because it has become familiar. That is the kind of marriage I want to build. Not one that simply lasts, but one that remains tender on purpose. Maybe this is what sacred commitment was always meant to be. Not a cage, not a burden,